Hello and welcome to our first of 91 updates that we're going to be providing across the state this week. My name is Graham Thomas. Our Executive Director, Krissy DeAlejandro, is also with us today. We're so glad that you could join us as we kick off a week of what is going to be a lot of very data-driven discussions around the way Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise are working both across the state and in the local communities that we serve. So first up, we are kicking off the week now with a statewide update. So you're going to notice that during this particular presentation that your cameras are turned off and your microphones are muted. You are going to be able to interact with us by using the chat box at the bottom or the Q&A box. We certainly want to take your questions as you have them. Feel free to type them in. We may answer some of them during the presentation. We may wait and save some till the end, just kind of depending on where we are in the presentation, but want to make sure to get all of that answered for you. We hope that you are also able to join us later this week for your specific community, or if you're serving several communities, for those updates. Many of those updates, you are going to be able to turn your camera on, have your microphone on, and ask us questions live. But for some of the larger presentations where there are a lot of participants, we're going to go this route just for the sake of the sound quality and video quality and all of those things. But really excited about this week. Really, in with a half day today and a half day Friday, we're going to do 91 of these in about 4 days. So hope that you are able to join us. Really, the purpose of what we're doing, when we created Tennessee Promise back in 2015, it was important to us that we were, one, held accountable with the local communities that we serve. Two, that we always provided you with an update with our progress, with our struggles. It's very important that we're very transparent. And so a few years ago, Krissy and I and some other members of the team went and visited all 90 counties that we serve. We figured this year with the pandemic, as things continue to be uncertain and gathering large groups, that this would be the way to go. So this is our effort to provide you with an update to make sure that you're never in the dark with the work that we're doing, and that you are able to have an understanding of the progress we're making, the struggles that we're continuing to face, and provide your input. Because what we know is that as we're digging into local communities, we've been to them all. We have met many of you and we've been there, but that you still continue to know your communities better than we do. So your input and your feedback is really essential to the work that we're doing. So Krissy and I are going to tag team this one today, but she's going to kick us off with our student update.
Thanks so much, Graham, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. As Graham said, it's always been incredibly important to us to keep the work as local as possible. What we know for certain is that strategies work in terms of lifting up students from more vulnerable backgrounds, for example, but also the localness is incredibly important to think about. A student in Shelby County may be different than a student in Hamlin County in terms of services offered, or the thought process, or the culture around going to college. And so that localness, which I don't even know is a word, but we're going to use it a lot this week, remains incredibly important to us. So thank you for being on this journey with us. Next slide. So I think it's always important to remind those in our orbit that Tennessee Achieves is a 501c3 nonprofit. We operate in partnership with the state. We actually are not a state entity. We have served as the partnering organization to Tennessee Promise since the launch of the class of 2015. We now serve 90 of the state's 95 counties. You can see here some really big numbers. The fact that we've worked with 440,000 students and 71,000 mentors just seems mind-blowing to me on every level, but certainly something that we take incredibly seriously here. And as Graham said, we've traveled to all these communities, some multiple times over, to ensure that we are both transparent and honest with data. We're a data-driven organization, and so much of what you will see today will be rooted through a data lens. Next slide. So just to ground us in what is Tennessee Achieves? So you're a nonprofit and you partner with Tennessee Promise. So yes, we're making sure that students are meeting all the Tennessee Promise requirements, sending an insane amount of communication coming out of our shop. But you can see here, we're also so much more than the partnering organization to Promise. When we lifted up Knox Achieves in 2008, 2009, it was incredibly important that the students not only had universal access to our community and technical college via a last dollar scholarship, it was also important that they had a support system, someone in their corner. So as I said, 71,000 volunteer mentors recruited, and we're continuing to recruit at least 9,000 every year to meet student demand. And Graham will talk about that more in depth in a bit. We have also asked that our students give back at least 8 hours of community service to cultivate that sense of service that we hope carries them through. And the team shared with me recently, because we do survey our students if they liked it. Do you actually like service? And what we found is 96% of our students say they in fact enjoyed their community service. So we got 4% to work on, but still a really great statistic around that. This is, again, sort of changing that dynamic within a student. So hopefully lifelong givers back to the community. We also host a suite of summer programs that we're incredibly proud of. We have a summer bridge program, a 3-week academic boot camp that works with students who require remediation. We have a more intensive summer institute, which is this year it was 6 weeks. It's typically 10 weeks, but it's credit bearing. So it works in the urban core in Memphis to serve that student population, and we're hoping to spread that. But we've seen an overwhelming amount of success in those programs. We also lifted up a homegrown online summer bridge program this year that we're incredibly proud of, and the success rate coming out of it was impressive considering it was the first year. But again, we're really about ownership of that bridge from high school to post-secondary. We feel as if all students need support over that critical summer to reduce summer melt, and our summer programs are one way of addressing that. We also have a proactive coaching model in partnership with the state. We lifted this model up several years ago to serve our most vulnerable student populations. We're not waiting on students to come to us. We're proactively working with students on a monthly basis to ensure they feel supported and that they have all the tools they need to earn a post-secondary credential. And then finally, it's that targeted, personalized support that we believe is the foundation of the work we do here. We really do try to meet each student where they are at scale. It's an internal philosophy at Tennessee Achieves. So if you have 90,000 students every year, that's quite the lift. But we have gotten really smart about communication, and we do see that that is moving the needle. Next slide. So here's some numbers for you. Like I said, 90 counties, 74 rural, 35 are at risk or distressed, and that 601 high school number includes not only our public schools, but also our private and homeschool collaboratives that we're working with. 67 of our post-secondary partners, 13 community colleges, our 27 TCATs, and then 4-year institutions who are offering an associate's degree program. You can also see where our students are landing. Overwhelming majority, no surprise, at our state's community colleges, but also many of our students enrolling at a TCAT or our Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, those technical colleges that have really impressive graduation rates, and then 10% enrolled at our 4-year institutions. Next slide. So again, we're working with 90,000 high school seniors, 60,000 high school seniors, 90,000 students total when you combine our high school seniors and our college students. This stat just continues to make me sort of spin around the fact that we work with 89% of the state's high school seniors, 89% of the state's high school seniors coming through Tennessee Achieves. I think if you would have told me that when we launched in Knox County and we served 493 students the first year, I would have thought you were insane. But I'm really happy that our school counselors work tirelessly to ensure that every student has Tennessee Promise in their corner via Tennessee Achieves. We also work with 78% of first-time full-time freshmen at the state's community colleges, and then 86% of that first-time full-time graduation rate at our state's community colleges are Tennessee Achieves students. So again, really big stats around how we can be in this needle-moving kind of work. Promise spends about $32 million annually on those last dollar scholarships. The last I saw, the average student scholarship was about $1,100 annually, so right around $1,000 in that last dollar space. And Tennessee Achieves has a $2.5 million annual operating budget that we raise privately, as well as, again, in partnership with the state to lift up some really specific programming. We do have an 86% FAFSA file rate, that free application for federal student aid. I will tell you this to benchmark, most states are thrilled to hit the 50% mark. So the fact that Tennessee continues to lead the country is thanks to a really concerted and aligned effort among K-12. A huge shout out to our school counselors and leadership in that space. Our post-secondary partners who also help with this large lift, and Tennessee Achieves, again, sort of owning that transition specifically around ensuring that what once was a barrier for students is no more in Tennessee. And returning to those 8 hours of community service, I knew we would get here and I didn't want to steal my own thunder, but our students have given back nearly 3.4 million hours of community service. So Randy Boyd, our chair, says that this makes Tennessee Achieves the largest community service organization in the state. No one has told us that's not true. We actually don't know if it's true, but we're running with the accolade, at least internally, for now anyway. Next slide. Okay, so program demographics, I just want to highlight a few of these. You can see on the left-hand side here, the ethnicity, 70% white, 14% identifying as Black or African American, and then that 7% Hispanic or Latino population. Also, I think incredibly important to highlight would be our Pell eligible students. That's how we measure household income. It's a long, complicated equation, but how we measure household income. You can see 56% of students are considered economically disadvantaged as measured by Pell. Also, you can see that 45% of our students have less than a 19 on the ACT, the 19 being very intentional cut for us, as that is a college readiness measure for our state's public colleges. And then you can also see a breakdown of programs of study. At the bottom, I recently presented to the National Science Board, and so we pulled this data and we found it incredibly interesting. I love that 27% of our students, for example, are majoring in health science, considering the nursing shortage. We continue to hear from our workforce development partners, and so our students are coming in and really digging into the right majors. And finally, just want to point out that first generation students, this is a self-identifying percentage. So I always struggle with it because our students have a really difficult time wrapping their brains around what it means to be first generation. And I don't know that there is a standard definition of first generation. I always think about it as if no one in your immediate family went to college, you'd be considered first gen. But you can see here, 42% of our students are identifying as a first generation student. Next slide. Okay, the really important stuff. So how are we doing? You can see here, we're just going to benchmark you really quickly what we're seeing at our state's community colleges in terms of first year retention. So the student begins in the fall and returns the following fall is 53%. So about 53% of the students coming back after that first year of enrollment. At Tennessee Achieves, that jumps from 53 to 67% in terms of retention, with 74% of our students retaining anywhere, right? Students who are pursuing any type of post-secondary but come through our program. Our 6-year graduation rate is at 51%. This one keeps me up at night. I want to be doing better than 51%, but you can see if you're benchmarking how we're doing against a first-time full-time freshman, not or across the state, it's actually 35%. So our students are very much outperforming a first-time full-time freshman general statistic. So we're thrilled about that. You can also see some programmatic impacts on the side. I talked to you about our summer programs. Those have increased our first-year retention by 34%. So a significant jump for our participants. The challenge is continuing to convince students to give up time over their summer. Many are working, many are vacationing. What we do want them to participate in these very impactful summer programs. Also, an increase in 23% around Complete. Complete is that proactive coaching model that I talked to you about. What statistics will tell us is that students who fall into the lowest income bracket are the first to leave post-secondary. And so Complete really is designed for that student population, which oftentimes has a much lower retention and completion rate than their higher income peers. And you can see here, Complete is helping us close that critical income equity gap. And then Knox Promise, which we have not talked about, but Tennessee Achieves loves the fact that we serve as a proof point for the state. So we love creating new programs that are informed by data. What's the data telling us? And also being informed by our students. We are talking to students every day at Tennessee Achieves, and what we hear from them is what informs our work. And so Knox Promise was really born out of, first, a generous donation from the Haslam Family Foundation. They came to us and said, if you could build your ideal College Promise program, what would it be? So we utilized Tennessee Promise to provide the foundation with the last dollar scholarship. They received a volunteer mentor. They're completing those hours of community service. They're having access to summer programs, but they also, regardless of income, receive a coach, a proactive coach. So we have 5 Knox Promise coaches working with specifically Knox County graduates. We also have lifted up a completion grant program for students. It's also known as emergency aid. I just hate that word. So it's a completion grant for students who do need an additional boost financially to ensure that books are not a hurdle, food insecurity is not a hurdle, housing instability is not a hurdle. So again, sort of knocking down additional barriers that stand in the way of student success. Next slide. And so thinking about first-year retention and 3-year graduation rate, you can see here we've broken this down by demographic, by the number of students enrolled by ethnicity, and then that first-year retention rate and 3-year graduation rate. Again, here's the highlight or the byline, is that we have to do more to close those critical equity gaps. For us, this is very much something that we're looking into digging into, but thinking about the fact that we're retaining students who are white at a 68% versus Black African American students at 60%, and then you've got a 20 percentage point gap between those two ethnicities when you look at 3-year graduation rate. More needs to be done, and we're really looking into strategies to dig into this specifically. Next slide. So I hate to turn it over to Graham with sombering news, but in my mind, this is our call to action. You can look, we made all this really amazing progress in 2014 to 2015. That 2015 jump is the first year of promise. That 1-year jump represents more than the 7 years prior combined. It was a 4.6% increase in our state's college going rate. You can see here, COVID has dramatically affected the college going rate. So that new student we had in the pipeline, and my fear, and although we don't have the data, is that it's the most vulnerable student who did not attend, those equity gap closures that we were just talking about become even more exaggerated when I see something like this, is that there's very much more for us to do. Tennessee Achieves committed to this work and looking at digging in, changing and thinking through the lens of reimagining the value proposition of post-secondary and how we can provide additional layers of support. But for those of you who are mentoring, this is the time to sign back up. This is the time to recruit your friends, but I will turn it over to Graham.
Great. Thanks so much, Krissy. So what can you do to help us out specifically with this college going rate decrease that we saw due to COVID? The most important thing I think we do on the access side is provide every single student that applies for Tennessee Promise in these 90 counties with a volunteer mentor. See, several of you on the call today have served in this role before, but just a real quick reminder of what exactly it looks like. So the first thing that we're asking our mentors to do is to be that task manager, making sure that students are meeting deadlines, they're submitting their applications, they're completing their financial aid paperwork, that they're making progress towards college while remaining eligible for the scholarship. Second thing we say is they're that trusted family resource, the person that they can turn to when they have a question, when they don't know what the next step is, when they get a letter from financial aid and they don't know what it means. They have someone they can call, text, or email and help overcome whatever that barrier might be. And for the last 12 years, I've gone out across the state and said that I think the most important role is that of the encourager. As we are continuing to navigate such uncertain times, I certainly think this is the most important role that our mentors play. Someone that says, hey, you know what, you can do this, and it's challenging. And anyone who's ever been to college before struggled, right? Whether it's the math class or writing papers, or you're juggling working 40 hours a week and going to school full time, and just that's normal. And it's okay that we're all going to struggle in this process at some point in time. If you have mentored with us previously, mentoring in 2022 is going to look different than it looks this year, which has looked different than it looked the previous 11 years. So if you mentored with us this year, you know that we invested in an online platform called Tennessee Achieves Connect that allows you to meet with students with a webinar-like feature, a video chat feature. It looks a lot like this. You can still call, you can still text, you can email. And you also know that it's giving you an additional level to track your students that we've never had before. So you can see when your students are applying to college, when they are enrolled full-time. Our mentors are giving us really, really strong feedback on this platform. That's going to be here to stay going forward in 2022. We've made it quite a significant investment in that. And so that will be here. If you mentored with us previous to 2021, you remember those large meetings in the high schools where all the students came, all the mentors came, a lot of parents came. They were large, they were crowded, a little hot, a little sweaty. We're not going to bring those back for 2022, but we are going to provide you with some in-person options. We recently surveyed our current mentors, and about 2/3 of you told us that you want some type of in-person opportunities in 2022. So a couple of things happening in 2022 that we've never done before. One, Connect is here to stay. So if you are using Connect and you only want to use Connect, that will be there as an opportunity for you, and every mentor will have access to that platform. Second, we are going to offer what we're calling open houses that we are hoping to host mostly at the colleges on a college campus across the state, where we will block off 3 or 4 hours on a day where you can invite your students to come, sit down, and meet with you. There will be a Tennessee Achieves staff person there to answer questions. It sounds like many of our colleges plan on having staff there to help complete applications, to knock out those financial aid files, whatever it is that your students need to do. But a place where you can come, we will have the space, you can meet with them. And then we're also going to encourage you to meet with your students on your own. Over the last 12 or 13 years, we know this has been happening. We haven't really encouraged it a lot, but we heard a story this past summer about a mentor who set up her own summer bridge program in her front yard, where a student came and she got the student ready, and the student went and took the post-test to test into college level coursework. Our board chairman, sorry, Randy Boyd and board there. Randy takes all of his students out for pizza. And so we're going to encourage things like that, still with a minimal time commitment of about 1 hour a month or 12 hours per year. Go to the next slide. You can see that we still need about 9,000 mentors across the state. If you would like to join us, you can visit our website, tnAchieves.org/mentors, and apply by December 3, 2021. New mentors, if you've not mentored with us before, there's an application. You get to pick your county, your high school, where you want to mentor. Returning mentors, your application is real brief. You can also just reply to any of the emails that we send you, and we can renew your application in our system on the back end. So a couple of different options for you there. Once you apply, you will receive information about your training, a little bit longer training for our new mentors, a little bit shorter training for our returning mentors, but would certainly love to have you join us in 2022 as we are full blown searching for these 9,000 people now. Next slide. So what are your next steps? Just mentioned, you can become a mentor. We would certainly love to have you. We would also love for you to send this out across your networks. So if you have an active email chain or are on an email chain where you can send this out, or maybe you're with an organization that has a newsletter, we have content available for you. We can send that over. All you need to do is email mentors@tnAchieves.org. We would also love to come and visit with your community. We have, I don't know if there's a Rotary Club or a Kiwanis Club in Tennessee that we have not visited. But we're always happy to come. We can provide you with an update like what we're doing this week. We can do the big picture story. Again, can also provide content for email blasts, newsletters, social media content, anything you can do to help us connect to active individuals in your community. We would certainly love that opportunity. And then the Tennessee Promise application for students is live. Also, students have until November 1st to apply. So if you are working with a group of seniors, or you know a senior and you think this is an opportunity for them, our school counselors do a really, really good job. Like Krissy showed you earlier, 89% of seniors in Tennessee are going through our program alone. That's not including the Ayers Foundation, who operates the other 5 counties. Over 90% of seniors are applying, but it's never hurts to present this opportunity to them as many times as possible. Next slide. That is everything that Krissy and I have for you for today, but we are certainly happy to take your questions. If you have them, please, again, you can put them into the chat box or into the Q&A box below. We want to make sure we get all of your questions answered before we shut down the webinar today. And remind you again that we're doing 90 more of these this week for each individual county that we work in. It will look like this, but it's going to have your specific county data. So I saw Mike Whitehead, who's one of our TCAP presidents on. Mike, if you want to hop on and see what Giles County looks like. I saw John Cagle, one of our assistant principals in Jefferson County, is on. You hop onto that one, you're going to get to see just your Jefferson County data, and same thing for the other 89 counties.
Yay, John Cagle.
We would love to have you join us for your individual community updates, but happy to take any questions that you may have. See, it looks like Jack, you may have just raised your hand. If you can just type your questions into the chat box or into the Q&A box there, we'll make sure to get those. We'll leave it up and running here for just a second. Krissy, any other final comments?
No, just thank you. What an amazing 13-year journey we've had. And I think much of it can be attributed to the continued support that we have from our communities across the state. So forever indebted. John says, hey.
Hey, John.
John, we're a huge fan of you too.